Good afternoon, everyone. We are thrilled to announce our new endeavor, a podcast series called The Greener Side. So, in the series, we will uncover and discuss topics that strongly influence our lives, ranging from water, environment, climate, finance, research, and media. On this series, we will invite guest speakers. These are individuals who are passionately active and knowledge experts of the diverse sectors. As we are on our journey to understand the challenges and potential solutions for moving onto the greener side, we welcome you all to hop on and join the journey and learn along with us. So let's begin with the episode one. I am Ankita. Today, we journey into the heart of one of India's most breathtaking landscape and a UNESCO World Heritage, the Western Ghats. When I refer to this term Western Ghats, it is important for us to unveil some ecological marvels of the Western Ghats and its contribution to our planet. I'm happy to welcome our esteemed guest, Mr. Gurdas Nolkar, in this podcast. Just to give you a background of Dr. Nolkar, he's a professor and director of Center for Sustainable Development, Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics, Pune. He's also a visiting faculty at IIT Kanpur. His doctoral research in sustainability within industrial ecosystem was followed by postdoctoral endeavor, fellowship of the Government of Australia. He has published many books, several research papers, monographs, articles. Two of his Marathi books have received Maharashtra State Literature Award and Maharashtra Sahitya Parishad Awards. Dr. Nolkar is also on the board of Ecological Society Pune and a fellow of Pune International Center in the Energy, Environment and Climate Change vertical. We welcome you, sir.
Hello. Thank you so much.
So to begin with, I think it will be important for us as you have extensively worked in the Western Ghats. So, we have often heard that it is one of the hot biodiversity spot in the globe. And it plays significant role when it comes to, India providing the rich biodiversity to India and also plays a significant role in India's economy. So we really wanted to understand what are some of the interesting facts that makes this Western Ghats ecological wonder.
So first and foremost, we have to understand what is the scope of the Western Ghats. Western Ghats starts almost at where the river Tapi meets the sea and extends right up to Kerala, almost up to Kanyakumari. So if you look at the north-south expanse of the Western Ghats, it's significant. Right. So which means that there is a change in the amount of sunlight that it gets everywhere. The altitude varies. The amount of rainfall is different. It acts as a barrier to the clouds that come from the Arabian Sea. And therefore, the physical diversity in the Western Ghats is phenomenal. And that is a prerequisite for biological diversity. So once we have different physical conditions, climatic, weather, soil conditions, altitude, rainfall, all of these make very unique habitats, which are then occupied by biological diversity, which evolves over millions of years. So what we are seeing today is essentially the evolution which has happened over the last 40, 45 million years, or more than that, actually. So therefore, these physical diversity characteristics that the Western Ghats has is extremely important. So that, I think, is the starting point of our discussion is biological diversity is actually a manifestation of the physical diversity. Right? So life adapts to the physical conditions. And because these conditions vary, different forms of life come up there.
Totally. So as you rightly mentioned, Dr. Nolkar, about, there are physical diversity that has that you have witnessed in the Western Ghats, and they play a significant role. So we really wanted to understand more from you in terms of like when you say that geological aspects as well as some climatic features, they contribute significantly in making an ecosystem or enrich that ecosystem or a biodiversity. So can you throw some light on that part as well? Like how does it really affect the ecosystem or the biodiversity of any region for that matter?
How does the physical diversity affect? No, what is the question again?
Geological as well as climatic features, like how it influences a unique ecosystem or a biodiversity for that matter.
Yeah. Now, if you look at the Sahyadri, it starts right from Konkan, which is almost at an altitude of 0 to 15, 20 meters above sea level. From that point on, it rises right up to over 1,000 meters above sea level. So this altitudinal variation causes difference in temperature. The daytime temperature, nighttime temperatures, they differ. The soil varies between altitude. So at Konkan, you have a different kind of soil than you see at the higher altitudes. And at the top of the Sahyadri, there are many places which are almost like a lateritic cap on the Sahyadri. So this is a result of millions of years of rainfall, of heat, of sunlight, and all of these characters which are varying across the altitude. So the soil, the temperature, the rainfall are the three main things which actually decide on what kind, or not decide, what influence on what kind of life can survive. And that is essential to our understanding of how evolution works. Evolution works because these habitats create different conditions for life to survive, and the different forms of life evolve in these kind of conditions. They compete with each other in different ways, they work with each other in different ways. There is symbiotic relationships, there is parasitic relationship, there is communalism. So there are many different types of relations, ecological relations, which these organisms have between themselves and within themselves. And that is important because that changes between the altitudes of Sahyadri, and it changes between the latitudes of Sahyadri, which means the northern Western Ghats have different forms of species composition than the southern Western Ghats, which typically we call southern Western Ghats after Karnataka, right up to Kerala. And the northern Western Ghats are from Goa onwards till the end till the northernmost point of the Sahyadri. So that changes. Also, the precipitation changes, which means the water laden clouds which come from the Arabian Sea, they they empty out into the Sahyadri mountains in the Western Ghats in different forms, in different furies. So some places have got over 3,000, 4,000 millimeters of rainfall. On the other hand, some places have very little rainfall. So that changes how the soil is eroded, how it is deposited, how the organic matter which is continuously falling into the soil is decomposed over time, and how the nutrition is the nutrients are moving from one place to another.
Understood. So, I mean, often we have heard from our audience also, I think we will be very keen on understanding more about when we say that Western Ghats are critical for India, if we look at because of their geographical location itself. So, why do we consider it to be a very important for the country like India? Like many states are dependent. I mean, the rainfall patterns are decided by how the ecology will be out there in the Western Ghats. So it becomes a significant for the country. So can you help us understand more about it, like how it is contributing uh, in a positive manner for India, for the country basically?
Yeah, indeed. I mean, the Western Ghats are absolutely critical for the entire India, and especially so the peninsular India. Any mountain range is actually a rain divide. Yeah. So if you look at the the Western Ghats, they start in the north and go right down to the south, and they have a eastward slope and they have a westward slope. Right. So when there is rainfall happening on the mountain range, the drops of rain which are falling on the eastern slopes drain out into the Bay of Bengal. The drops of rain which fall on the western slope drain out into the Arabian Sea. And that helps peninsular India get its supply of fresh water. Their rivers originate in the Western Ghats, in the northern Western Ghats. That's an important source of fresh water for everybody, right up to Visakhapatnam, Chennai, and all these places which are on the east coast. The largest peninsular rivers, all of them originate from the Western Ghats, right? Starting from Godavari to Krishna to Kaveri, Tungabhadra, all of these start of that. On the other side, the western side are very short rivers because there is hardly any gap between the Western Ghats and the Arabian Sea. The average gap is around less than 80 to 100 kilometers. So they are very short flowing rivers. So on one hand, you have very long flowing rivers which drain into the Bay of Bengal and they irrigate the entire floodplains of peninsular India. And on the other hand, you have very short rivers which are actually on the steep slopes of Sahyadris of the Western Ghat, and they create huge erosion and deposition. And thus you have extremely rich mangrove forests on the west coast. Because all that silt, that organic matter which is coming from the Western Ghats due to the rain, goes and gets deposited in the estuaries. And these estuaries are highly productive ecosystems on the planet. Mangrove estuaries, they are called as. And so what do I mean by ecological productivity? Is simply said, how much of sunlight is transformed into biological matter. Right. So if you look at estuaries, they provide a huge amount of biological matter in a very short span. They are breeding grounds for aquatic fauna. So that is where our fish come to breed. That's where the crustaceans, the amphibians, the reptiles, all the aquatic creatures, they are coming out and breeding. So these are nurseries of aquatic life, extremely important for our marine fishery. And on the other side, the east flowing rivers are extremely good sources of nutrition because they carry the nutrition right from the Western Ghats and they deposit it all through the floodplains of Telangana, of Karnataka, of Tamil Nadu, and then they drain out into the Bay of Bengal. And while they are draining out into the Bay of Bengal, they deposit the fine silt there. And because they are such long rivers, you will see, if you take a look at the map of India, the eastern coast map of India is continuously building land because it's getting deposits of sediment there. And thus, you will see a curvature on the eastern side where the Damodar meets the Mahanadi meets the Godavari, the Krishna, all these rivers, they come and meet and they create these huge deltas and mangrove forests. So that is one of the most important things. Second, like I said, is irrigation. Yeah, our forests are irrigated by these rivers, which originate in the Western Ghats. Our fields are irrigated by that. And the other third important thing is they are sources of fresh drinking water for the cities. So Pune, for example, gets all its water from the Western Ghats. So also parts of Mumbai and Bangalore, Kaveri is also a source of water. Goa. So they provide us with fresh drinking water. The other major service is what we call as the gene bank. Because these Western Ghats have a huge phenomenal diversity, these are protected by the Western Ghats for centuries and millennia together. And if you look at the sacred groves which are there in the Western Ghats, they are absolute gene banks. We actually should just simply preserve and conserve them so that we are able to retain the gene diversity, the gene pool that exists on that. And that's a huge source of medicinal plants. You know, a lot of our medicines are synthesized from tree extracts, from leaf extract, from nectar, from barks, from roots, which are available in the Western Ghats. They're very important in our pharmaceutical industry, in our Ayurveda industry. And of course, the last thing is non-timber forest produce. They give us so many other things other than timber, right? And that is directly impacting the livelihoods of communities which have lived in the Western Ghats for centuries and thousands of years. So that overall, I would say, is the contribution. We also have a lot of hydroelectricity which is generated in the Western Ghats. All the dams of the Western Ghats. Koyna Dam, for example, is a phenomenal source of hydroelectricity, simply because of the potential difference that the Western Ghats are able to create in the head of the water.
Absolutely. As you rightly mentioned, I mean, it has like, different aspects you covered in terms of like how important Western Ghats are for the country. Like you mentioned about the curvatures, it is, the silt is getting deposited on the east of it and the land is increasing. But we are often seeing that because of climatic changes, the not only the countries are getting affected, but we have seen a significant impact of climate change in India, especially we see it as a threat to the Western Ghats. So, how do you see this can really impact the Western Ghats, the climatic changes that are taking place?
So I'll tell you a couple of examples that we have been working on in the Western Ghats. One of the most significant impacts of climate change on the Western Ghats is landslides. Right? We have periods of intense rainfall in a very short period. And that creates a significant movement of water under the soil. And it takes away large slabs of soil with that. A couple of years back, the Western Ghats in Maharashtra, we counted nearly over 1,000 landslides, mudslides, and rockfalls simply because of the intense rainfall. Okay, this is severely damaging to the entire fragile ecosystem. One, because it takes away large bodies of soil and deposits it into the river. Second, is the biological diversity which exists on those pieces of chunks which have been removed is totally lost. It's displaced. It goes somewhere else. It dies off. For example, large trees, old growth trees, they just snapped and then they traveled right up to the river. So landslides and intense rainfalls are something which are a result of climate change, and they are severely impacting. The second thing that we saw is that there are several dry spells and there are intense rainfall. This makes farming very difficult in the Western Ghats. Now, if farming becomes difficult, then the youth of those villages who live in the altitudes of about 700 to 800 meters above sea level, they start migrating to Mumbai. Some of them come down to Pune, and that leaves these villages and these communities very old and aging. So many of these villages along this 6, 7, 800 meter altitude band in the Sahyadris is aging. Now they can't do this difficult agriculture, but they can buy a few cows and few buffaloes and they let them out for grazing. That is actually creating a huge problem of forest regeneration on Sahyadri, because as the population of domesticated animals increases in Sahyadri, which is a result of climate change, then what happens is the extensive grazing which is done is only up to when the grass is green. After the grass starts turning yellow, people start burning away the grass. And these forest fires, which are actually not forest fires, but they are human-induced fires in the northern Western Ghats, they kill almost all the diversity there. Seeds cannot regerminate. The soil gets so hot that the soil microbiota just simply dies out. The slow-moving insects, they are 100% wiped out. Those insects which can fly away from the forest fire, they manage to escape. But the slow-moving worms and the diversity, all that completely goes away. So these forest fires also have become more intense because the temperatures have risen. It goes up to 45 degrees centigrade in some of these places, heats up the soil. Climate change is one of the significant effects of climate change is on the soil, especially in areas of the northern Western Ghats which do not have a forest cover, which do not have a thick canopy. Then the soil is entirely exposed to the sunlight. And if it is 40 degrees Celsius in the atmosphere, then the soil temperature can go as high as 50, 52 degrees Celsius, which is not suitable for the microbiota to stay alive there. So we are slowly seeing a degradation of the northern Western Ghats in terms of species composition, in terms of species population, in terms of the structure of the ecosystems there. That has been affected significantly, and it is bringing down the ecological productivity of the northern Western Ghats.
So there are some statistics available that you could highlight to look at how grave the situation is.
Absolutely. There are many studies done. We have done many studies in the Western Ghats also. The landslide studies available, I can share some of those links with you. The flood study is available. We looked at the flooding which has happened in the Konkan region. And again, there is large movement of soil due to these floods. Intense rainfall. Sometimes it doesn't create landslide, but it just simply pushes out a lot of soil from the Western Ghats onto the rivers, and they choke up, and that entire Konkan belt floods because of the large amount of soil which is brought and deposited into the river beds. The channel is constricted and all the water starts coming up. So we have figures on that. There are figures on forest fires. There is a website called Global Forest Watch, Global Fire Watch, on which you will see real-time fires. And all of these websites will have statistics of what kind of damage we are expecting due to climate change.
Sure, definitely. Love to read about more about the the various challenges that the Western Ghats is grappling with. One point which I really wanted to understand more from you is also about as we are seeing a lot of intense rainfall, which is because of that there is a lot of runoff of the soil, water is running off. But what what do you see that in, let's say, if I see a future, near future, what it would look like if we continuously going to face this problem over year and year? So let's say, do you see drought could also could affect this region in near future? Not only the intense rainfall, but how drought like situation could arise over here?
Absolutely. No, drought is the other side of the coin in climate change. When you have periods of intense rainfall, you have periods of extended no rainfall, and that also is a big problem. And these kind of drought conditions, the first thing that will do is, much of the old vegetation which is there in sacred groves in Western Ghats is essentially moist evergreen and evergreen vegetation. So that needs a lot of water throughout the year. Now, if that irrigation from precipitation is not going to happen, then the growth of these trees is going to have to get hampered. The regeneration is going to get hampered. The deciduous trees, the secondary growth is all deciduous, mainly deciduous trees in the Western Ghats. Now that also is getting affected. So the primary productivity of the Western Ghats is going to reduce if the droughts, if there are situations of drought conditions. The amount of water that is collected in the dams is going to change, and that is going to affect cities severely, because all our cities in peninsular India are dependent in some way or the other on the rainfall which happens at the Western Ghats. So that's a completely potential risk that we are facing of droughts.
So, as now, we are often reading it in the newspaper also, like this year will be El Nino. So, if we see this as a concept or this phenomena, if it is going to exist, how it would lead to what kind of things we are going to observe this year, especially from the Western Ghats perspective.
So, all of these kind of cyclones and cyclonic conditions, changes in weather patterns, they are what are called as oscillations. So they are essentially, climatic patterns which are changing significantly over a very short duration of time. And this is characterized by sea temperatures, which are a little above average in some parts of the planet. On the other hand, in some conditions, the sea temperature goes a little lower. Now, these are very, very sensitive conditions which affect the condensation, the cloud formation, the precipitation. All of these things are greatly influenced by these factors. So certainly, as climate change is dramatically changing these circumstances, we can expect to see some major effects on the Western Ghats. And that is going to affect not just the communities which are living there, but the entire peninsular India.
So this looks like a situation which we really need to really start thinking about, like how we are going to respond to the emerging needs that are going to come at a later point in time because of these kind of phenomena that are there. Thank you, sir. So I think we will continue our discussion with you. But I would like to thank you to all the audience who are present here for the episode 1. We would be talking more about the Western Ghats people and urgent needs of the time in our next episode. So stay tuned.